Have you ever heard a curse, so silent, so deadly, that it tore a kingdom apart? Not with swords. Not with armies. But with pain, with grief, and with justice whispered into the wind. This is not a fairy tale. This is history. A story buried in silence and shame. A tale that begins with a girl, a slave girl, whose name history tried to forget. But whose spirit refused to be erased. Her story is not just about suffering. It's about resistance, memory, and spiritual power. This is the slave girl who cursed her masters, and their dynasty fell. Welcome to the Chronicles of the Forgotten. The year was 1790. In a quiet village near the Volta River, a girl was born. Her mother called her Adoma, meaning grace in the Akan language. She was beautiful, joyful, free. Her father was a hunter. Her mother sold yams and herbs in the market. They were not rich, but they were together. Until war came. A local chief betrayed their village, selling children to slavers in exchange for foreign weapons. At age 12, Adoma was ripped from her mother's arms. Chains replaced her anklets. Her name was taken. She was now called Efua, a generic name given to slaves born on Friday. When the drumbeat changes, the dance must also change. African proverb. Adoma's life changed forever. She was taken far from her village to the royal palace of the Ahankara dynasty, deep in the Ashanti highlands. There, kings ruled with gold and fire. But beneath their shining thrones were dungeons of suffering. Efua was made a servant. Her job? To clean the king's court, fetch water for the queen, and never speak unless spoken to. She obeyed. But inside, she burned. The palace was a marvel of wealth. Walls lined with gold dust. Elephant tusks carved into the doors. Drums played every sunrise. The people outside cheered their king. But inside, servants wept in silence. King Osei Ahankara was feared across the land. Not for justice, but for cruelty. He took wives like cattle. He beat his guards for sport. And he treated his servants like insects. Efua, Adoma, was given to his third wife, Queen Abina, as a handmaid. Queen Abina, though childless, was jealous and cold. She hated Efua's beauty. Her silence. Her calm eyes. One evening, a golden bracelet went missing. Abina accused Efua. Without trial, Efua was tied to a tree and whipped. 50 lashes. Her skin tore. Her blood soaked the earth. She did not cry. A woman who does not cry is feared by even the gods. Oral saying. That night, a palace elder named Awodensua found Efua curled in a storeroom. She whispered an old prayer over her. Then she said, "There is fire in your blood, child. Let it not burn you. Let it burn them." From that day, Efua changed. She no longer lowered her head. She moved with the calmness of thunder in the distance. And the queen? She began to have nightmares. Every night, Queen Abina screamed about a girl with eyes of ash. She stopped eating. Her hair began to fall out. The palace priest warned. "Someone walks among us with a spirit older than the king's throne." The king laughed. But Efua simply smiled. A year passed. Efua spoke little. But the earth listened. The river behind the palace, once full, began to dry. The crops around the palace shriveled. Animals refused to drink from the palace well. The queen grew weaker. She coughed blood into silk cloths. The palace doctors could not explain it. Then, one morning, the king's first son collapsed in the courtyard. His eyes rolled back. His limbs twisted. He cried out, not to his father, but to a name no one recognized. "Adoma, forgive me." The king demanded answers. The priest said, "You have a spirit in your house that does not belong to you." King Osei, proud and enraged, ordered a cleansing. Servants were beaten. Sacrifices were made. But nothing worked. Then, Efua disappeared for 3 days. When she returned, her hands were covered in white clay. Her hair was tied with red thread. She had gone to the old forest, the place of the forgotten ones. Queen Abina died that night. No illness. No wounds. She simply stopped breathing. The curse does not come loudly. It dances barefoot. Akan saying. The king began to lose control. His counselors fought each other. 2 of them were poisoned. A third hanged himself. Whispers spread beyond the palace walls. The slave girl has power. She walks with the ancestors. And still, the king did nothing. But Efua was no longer hiding. She stood tall. Silent. Waiting. And the kingdom continued to rot. By the 3rd year of Efua's arrival, the palace was unrecognizable. The drums no longer played at dawn. The gold on the walls faded. Even the palace peacocks stopped singing. The once great Ahenkara dynasty had become a shadow. Plague swept through the city. Nobles fled. Merchants refused to enter the gates. Then the king's second son, the last heir, died in his sleep. No wounds. No sickness. He was 19. He had once mocked Efua for sweeping like a queen. Even the lion fears the wind it cannot see. African proverb. King Osei Ahenkara began to unravel. He screamed at his guards. Burned the priest's robes. He ordered Efua brought to him. But she was gone. Her mat was empty. Her clothes folded. No servant had seen her leave. And on the floor of her chamber, was a single black stone, wrapped in red cloth. Beside it, a note. You beat the girl, but not her name. You caged the body, not the spirit. The king fell to his knees. That night, lightning struck the palace roof. It caught fire. The sky lit up like judgment. Villagers say the flames danced in the shape of a woman's silhouette. By morning, the palace was nothing but ash. The Ahenkara dynasty was finished. No one ever saw Efua again. Some say she walked into the forest, where the ancestors welcomed her. Some say she took a boat across the Volta River and became a healer in a distant land. Others whisper that she never existed, that she was a spirit, sent to punish the wicked. But deep in the forest, elders tell stories of a woman in white, who appears in dreams of powerful men. And warns them. Do not forget the child you stepped on. She may rise. Years later, travelers came upon the ruins of the Ahenkara palace. At its center stood a lone baobab tree, untouched by the fire. Carved into its trunk were the words. Adoma did not die. She became the wind. This is not just a tale of revenge. It is a reminder that even the lowest voice can shake a throne. That pain, if ignored, can become prophecy. And that when we strip people of their names, their dignity, their humanity, we are writing our own end. The axe forgets. But the tree remembers. African proverb. Efua's story is not just hers. It belongs to every forgotten daughter. Every enslaved child. Every silenced voice that refused to stay buried. History may try to erase them. But their spirits, like wind, always return. But what if I told you? Efua's legacy did not end with the fall of the palace. What if, generations later, her name would rise again, in the heat of battle, in the cry of a warrior woman, standing before the British army? What if this so-called slave girl, was the spirit that lived on in Yasantua, the queen mother who defied an empire? In part 2 of Chronicles of the Forgotten, we follow that spirit. From ashes to armor. From servant to soldier. Don't miss it. Subscribe. Share this story. And remember, some curses don't destroy, they awaken. The fire had consumed the palace long before dawn. Where once stood golden pillars and marble floors, now there was only ash and smoke. The villagers who gathered at sunrise said they saw her, a woman cloaked in light and shadow, walking barefoot through the flames. Some believed it was a spirit. Others whispered the unthinkable, Adoma had returned. But no body was found. No bones. No cloth. Only the red-threaded stone, still warm, sitting quietly among the ruins. The Ahenkara dynasty was no more. Its last king, Ose, was never buried. His remains were eaten by fire and fear. The royal line ended, but the story of the girl they once called Efua was only beginning. For months, no one spoke her name aloud. Mothers told their daughters not to dream of her. But the dreams came anyway. In the hills beyond the old river, far from any village, the forest had begun to change. Hunters said the wind whispered like a woman weeping. Trees that had once borne fruit now bled red sap. A strange light flickered through the canopy at night, and footprints, bare and small, appeared on the riverbanks without anyone ever arriving. In time, that forest was given a name. The elders called it Samanthoa Sim, the place of the ancestors' business. And at its center, it was said, lived a woman who never spoke, but who healed the sick with a touch, and whose eyes made liars confess. They called her the Weaver, because she never left her compound but sent out messages by birds and dreams. No one could say if she was Adoma, or something else. Then came Amatano, a young girl with a limp and a deep scar across her chest. She had been beaten by a merchant for breaking a calabash. She fled into the forest, bleeding and afraid, ready to die. But she didn't. Instead, she woke up beneath a baobab tree, wrapped in white cloth, her wound closed. A woman stood beside her, placing herbs in a clay bowl. She said only one thing. Your pain is not your prison. It is your power. When Amma returned to her village 3 moons later, she was not the same. She no longer limped. She no longer cried. And when the merchant tried to strike her again, he fell to his knees, choking on his own breath. Amma did not touch him. She simply looked at him, with calm, deep eyes. She left the village the next morning. She walked into the forest, and was never seen again. More girls followed. Runaways. Beaten ones. Orphans. Widows. Some barely older than children. Some pregnant. Some with nothing but a torn wrapper and a whisper in their ears. They all went in. None came back. Instead, the forest began to breathe. Men who entered it with greed or anger returned sick, if they returned at all. Nobles who had once taken part in slave raids found their homes invaded by birds that screamed at night. Crops failed near the border of the trees. Drummers said they heard voices humming old war songs between the branches. The people began to believe. Adoma had become more than a woman. She had become a spirit. But not just any spirit. A calling. In secret, from village to village, women began to tell each other stories. Not of queens or warriors, but of slaves who would no longer kneel. A name began to pass from mouth to mouth like fire in dry grass. The daughters of Adoma. They didn't wear uniforms. They had no army. But they had memory, and they had pain, and together, those 2 things could topple empires. It started small. A corrupt tax collector fell ill after seizing a widow's land. His tongue turned black. He choked on his own breath. A chief who bought 3 girls as housemaids woke up with his hands covered in sores. His livestock died. He died soon after. None of these attacks were traced. There were no blades, no blood on the ground. Only whispers. Villagers said they saw young girls in white, standing at the edge of the forest. watching. Waiting. A new rumor spread, Adoma had chosen daughters, and they moved like mist across the land. But the kings of nearby regions grew afraid. They sent warriors to burn the forest. They set fires, chopped down trees, beat drums to silence the voices. But the more they cut, the faster the forest regrew. The more they burned, the colder their palaces became. One old king, desperate to preserve his throne, called for an oracle. He was told, "The one you beat has returned. She does not seek revenge. She seeks balance." And still, he sent soldiers into the forest. Only 2 returned. Both were blind. And both spoke the same thing over and over again. "She is not alone. She is not alone." A council of chiefs gathered in secret. They feared the rise of what they called the ghost daughters. But what they feared most was that their own daughters were listening. Because in every compound, in every village, women had begun to sit together at dusk, heads close, voices low. And sometimes, in the dark, their daughters disappeared, only to be seen again, walking barefoot toward the trees. Not one of them looked back. One chief's daughter was found sitting at the foot of the old Ahenkara ruins. She had carved something into the stone with her fingernail. "My name is not what you called me. My body is not yours." Adoma remembers. And above her head, stood a woman in white, with red thread in her hair. The elders now say the curse was not a single act, but a door. Opened by pain. Guarded by memory. Walked through by the daughters of the forgotten. And once a door like that is open, it cannot be closed.